Hi, everyone, and welcome back to From Pain Point to On Point, the podcast where we turn your sales challenges into gamification wins. I'm Britt, and today we are going to finish our series on Bartle players by rounding out with our final Bartle player type, killers. So we're going to jump into that today. We're going to walk through the difference between killers and all of the rest of our player types, how they fit within one another, and what you can do as a sales manager to motivate and engage the killers on your team. So let's dive right in and let's talk about what makes a killer. What is a killer? So if you've been with us since the beginning of the series, then you already know that the Bartle player type was created, and it was created for gaming, for online gaming, like World of Warcraft gaming, to kind of determine the different types of players that people fall into in those style of games. And what we found at SalesScreen is that that actually maps really, really well to sales teams and really aligns with all the different personalities that you would find on a sales team. And killers are really interesting because I think that for most people in sales, they would argue that killers are most of their team, right? And that sales is the place in which killers thrive. And that's not wrong. Killers definitely do thrive within sales. And we're also not wrong that killers gravitate towards sales more than, well, I don't know if I'd say more than any other career, but they definitely do gravitate towards sales because it's a commission driven world, right? Like we know it is all about the challenge of closing, and that is what killers really thrive on. They love to dominate. They're really motivated by beating out other people and outpacing the competition and really being the best. The thing that makes a killer a true killer is that they don't want to just win. Ultimately, and this doesn't sound very nice, but it is the truth. Ultimately, they want other people to lose. And so that means that they really appreciate things like leaderboards. They love to be pulled up on stage at a sales kickoff. They love to have recognition for their victories, and they kind of really hate anything that is going to drag them down or slow them down or take them off of the path that they think is the path of least resistance to hitting their goal. And that all sounds great. And that, I think, does really fit into the sales mindset, right? And definitely what we see in SalesScreen, we talk to so many different sales teams all the time. The thing that we see all the time is that sales managers, more often than not, are killers. And the reason why killers become sales managers is because they're good at their job. They're really good at their job. They're really good at closing the deal, making the relationships, and doing all the things that they need to do in order to get the job done. And like it is with almost any other job that you would have in the world, if you're really good at the thing that you do, you get promoted and you become in charge of other people doing the thing that you're going to do, right? And that's not a bad thing, but what that can mean is that oftentimes sales managers really only see their teams as killers. It's a lot harder for sales managers if they're in that killer mindset to think about the different styles and types of players that they might have on their team and how they may motivate them. So we're going to talk about killers today, and we're going to talk about not just the ways that you can motivate them, because I actually think that a lot of sales managers really do understand how to motivate killers. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how to get them to work well with others and how to get them on a path where they are achieving their goals and they're feeling that sense of accomplishment and they're feeling that sense of victory, but it still is like vibing and meshing with the rest of the different players that you have on the team. What we see when we're talking about killers and when killers aren't really managed properly, or when the rest of the team, for instance, isn't being managed properly, and we're not thinking about all of the different ways that we would engage or that we would motivate players, we can see that killers can be really demoralizing sometimes to teams. I think it's heavy who wears the crown to be at the top of the leaderboard over and over and over again. And it certainly can be demoralizing to the rest of the team, but can also be really demoralizing and to a degree ostracizing for killers who are always feeling like they need to pick up the slack in some way, right? If they are top dog over and over and over and over again, they're going to adopt that mindset and that responsibility. And partly because they want to, but partly because they've been put into the position. So yeah, you don't want to have killers that are always at the top, that are always doing the best, that are always number one, because it is a double-edged sword for both the rest of the team and also for the killer themselves. Killers can also bend or break the rules to stay on top. We've seen this before too. It's not fun. It happens kind of innocuously, I would argue, but it does, as in with most jobs, if you are doing a really good job, then you get a little bit of leniency with things. And this is not a good habit to get into with killers because this is something that they will take and run. And then the other thing, which we see less of, but is always a possibility, is chasing personal wins at the expense of the company. We don't really see that very much in like when we're talking to our sales teams, but it definitely feels like it could become a possibility for sure, especially depending on the industry that you're in and who you're selling into, all of those different variables. So let's talk about how killers fit in with the rest of the Bartle player type. We've talked about them before, but we'll do a quick refresher and talk about how they can work within those other types. So getting killers to interact with the rest of the team can be at sometimes a delicate balance. It certainly depends on the sales culture that you have. I think there's lots of room for killers to really dominate, like we said, and take over and make other people feel really bad. But that is also dependent on the culture that you have. If you're allowing that to happen as a sales manager, then of course you're going to get demoralized other players that don't feel like they want to contribute as much and don't feel as energized or engaged to be part of the team. But if you are a sales manager that's really focused on your culture and creating a really inclusive environment and also acknowledging that you have other people on your team that are not just killers and also catering to those styles, then you can really see success and you can really create a team that's very cohesive, where everybody is working within their own lane and doing so well and collaboratively and happily and all of those great things. So we have our killer, and next would be our achievers. Achievers are really respected by killers. Killers also really respect achievers. Game recognize game, if you will. Achievers are really motivated by their own internal achievements. They're really driven by mastery over whatever the project is that they're working on. So they will work hard and they will try to beat killers, but they're also going to play by the rules, right? Because this isn't for external glory or validation. This is for them. So in order for them to feel like they want it and to feel like they actually earned it, then they're going to do everything that they can by the book. And if you've got a killer that's going a little bit rogue or feeling like that they have carte blanche to do whatever they want because they're bringing in the most revenue or whatever the case is, then those two are not going to get along. Socializers are usually horrified by killers. I feel like I can say this as a socializer. I can say that this can be true. I've definitely met some killers in my day, and I definitely have been horrified by them. We are as opposite ends as you could possibly go in terms of engagement style and a path forward to the goal, right? So socializers and killers, the cultural aspect of this and making sure that we are, as a manager, that you are doing things that are collaborative and you're doing things that are for the team, running team competitions or breaking people up into groups and running competitions that way. That's also really helpful, but really trying to get more of that collaboration in place. So socializers one can socialize with their killers and that killers can see what socializers can do for them and how they can work with socializers to help benefit them and get them closer to their goal, which socializers would be happy to do. We're happy to do that. We want everybody to win. We don't care. And then lastly, we have our explorers, and explorers, killers are really confused by explorers. Explorers are really here because they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to innovate, they want to find new paths. They want to break into new markets, all of those things, which is really not at all what killers are trying to do. Killers are really trying to see a number, they're trying to hit it. So they're just in like completely separate leagues almost. They're really not even in the same lane. And I think Two, as a sales manager, that's fine. I think we find in SalesScreen that we don't actually get a ton of explorers on sales teams, mainly because explorers is just not a player type that I would argue works really well on a sales team. It doesn't mean they can't. They absolutely can. We did a whole episode on explorers and the ways that they can benefit your sales team. But it does require for sales managers to think outside of the box a little bit and facilitate that with their explorers. And we know that sales is such an activity-driven career, it's such an activity-driven role that explorers can have a hard time getting in there. It needs to be the right sales team or the right industry, or all of the stars need to align. But you are for sure on a sales team. You are absolutely going to have a sales team made up of achievers, killers, and socializers. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you are paying attention to the culture. You're paying attention to who's getting shout out all the time, who's winning all of the competitions, who's always at the top of the leaderboard, etc., so that you can really foster a culture of recognition and also engagement across the board, across all of the players that you have. Because if you are only doting on your killers, if you're only paying attention to your killers, then you are missing out on a huge portion of your team and their contributions to hitting goal. All right, that's a lot. So now let's talk about how we can motivate killers in the right way. All right. So we're going to talk strategy. You've got a killer on your team and you don't want to change them, because we don't want to change killers. We love killers. There is a reason why sales is filled with them. There's a reason why they work so well on sales teams, why they're so successful on sales teams, why so many sales managers and sales VPs and CROs are the killer player type. It's because they do really well here. So this isn't about changing who they are. This isn't about changing even their work style, honestly. This is really about how do we harness all of that power? How do we harness the power and channel it into a place where we're going to see the most success across the board? And when I say across the board, I mean across with your team, across your company, across departments, not just across your dashboard. Hopefully a SalesScreen dashboard, but it could be another dashboard if you want it to be. All right, so things that really work for killers. We know that leaderboards, that's huge. They love leaderboards. They loved being at the top of the leaderboards. They love to see themselves climb to the top of the leaderboards. Leaderboards are just a really great visualization of a killer's success. So they really love that. Another thing that you could do to motivate or engage the killers on your team is a winner takes all competition. So if you give them a very kind of high stakes competition, I think also too a bracket competition could work really well for this player type. I think that part of why killers really love what they love about sales and being a killer is really like knocking people out of the running. So having a bracket style competition is kind of nice because it's all head to head, but there is an ultimate winner. And March is coming up, March Madness, baby. So get your bracket competition set up and see who comes out on top, and maybe that's your killer. All right. Next thing would be badges, titles, exclusive rewards. I think that there are ways that you can make the badges or achievements really special and really very elite. And maybe it's the amount of times that they unlock that achievement, unlock something else, or maybe it's seller or top salesperson or elite salesperson, something along those lines, but something that's a little bit above, a little bit higher than all of the rest of the achievements or badges you may have for your team already. The last thing would be clear boundaries. I know everybody loves boundaries. What a fun word. I really do feel like the past couple of years we've been really boundary heavy, just culturally as a society. But that's good. It's important. Boundaries are important. So for killers, you're going to want to make sure that they are working within ethical and company approved guidelines, because sometimes they will want to try to game the system a little bit to get ahead. And we can't really have that. We can't really have the playing field being uneven for everybody else on the team and your killers getting this boost up. And maybe that's something that, like, as a sales manager, you wouldn't realize was happening. But I think that in most scenarios, sales managers are aware and are condoning any of these actions because they are also killers and their main goal is to get to the top. So I think being really cognizant of developing a playground that is ethical for your team is going to be important and also ties back to this cultural element of creating an environment in which everybody feels like they are engaged and that they're getting the things that they need in order to keep them engaged. All right. So what doesn't work for your killers? What are some things that would demotivate your killers? Well, the first thing would be something really innocuous, like a most improved award or any other type of participation trophy. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. That's not for them. That's not what they're going for. As a socializer, I would love a participation trophy. Please give me the participation trophies. I'm here for the good time. So I want everybody else to win the big awards and I can just have the participation trophy. But killers, that's not going to get them excited. In fact, it's probably going to offend them. So I would stay away. I would also stay away from really long, drawn out competitions. So, speaking of our bracket competition, I think that really works well if you are doing a short period. Killers will really respond well if you're doing a short period. And prior to that, you could do qualifying rounds of head to head with other people on the team and then get like the top 16 into a bracket style competition or the top 8 even into a bracket style competition. And that would work really well for killers because it's like taking the best of the best and then putting them into a bracket competition where they get to knock out all of their most fierce competitors. But if you have a competition that runs on for way too long, then that's going to frustrate them and they're going to lose interest and they're not going to want to participate anymore. Lastly, what won't work for your killers is doing team-based competitions without a clear MVP. So if you're doing a team contest, which I do suggest doing a team contest with your killers as a way to foster culture and create relationships among the team, give out an individual award as well. I think that we all think about competitions as the winner takes all, but there are so many different ways that you as a sales manager can get creative with the types of different competitions that you run and the game mechanics there and the incentivizations and the rewards. There's just really endless opportunity to create something that will speak to everybody. So you could absolutely do a team-based competition, and within that team-based competition, there are either like side goals, other big goals, or there are other big rewards or incentivizations that can speak directly to your killers and also to your achievers. So when you're thinking about a team-based competition, think about what is everybody going to get out of this? And if I'm putting my killer into a team-based competition, how am I going to stoke that competitive fire in my killer in the way that makes the most sense for them? So those are our tips for what doesn't work when it comes to killers and how not to motivate them. And on that same note of having something that is having rewards and team-based competitions, I think another way that you can really engage your killers on your team, but keeping it really light and keeping it really fun is by making your rewards or your incentives really silly. So one thing that you could do is you could have like a WWE style belt that you can give out to the person who does the best within the competition. Or you could make them wear a funny hat, or you could have like a really big trophy that people get to keep on their desk. But something that's just fun and maybe different from the standard commission or monetary bonuses that you would give out in a competition. And we know that this works really well. We've had a lot of customers, we've had a lot of conversations with sales managers who have done exactly this, and it works better than money, honestly. It is so funny to hear stories about sales teams and the way that they have really rallied around like the big trophy that they get to keep when they win the weekly competition and keep it on their desk and they get to have bragging rights. That is We hear it all the time. Even at SalesScreen, we have a reward shop, and in our reward shop, we have all sorts of different gifts that you could get, company swag, monetary rewards like gift cards or AirPods or something like that. But we also have free rewards in our gift shop too. And our free rewards are by far our most popular rewards. Asking a colleague to get you coffee, things like that. So there are a bunch of different ways that you can incentivize in a fun way, in a playful way, that are going to engage all of the people on your team, but also are going to make those killers feel like extra special, which is ultimately what they want. So, what is the takeaway? Killers are powerful. What a sentence. Maybe we need a different name for killers. It just hit me now. Killers are powerful, and they can really lead a team to success, or they can really sow some division. And that really depends on how you, as a sales manager, decide to manage them. They need the right competitions. They need to have battles that are worth fighting, that get them excited, that get them involved and get them engaged. But we want to make sure that those competitions are going to be productive and that they're not going to ostracize anyone else. They need to have clear rules. So, very clear what you can and what you cannot do, and you kind of got to stick by that as the manager. You've got to be able to enforce the rules. And the last thing, and kind of maybe like a tip, is that they do respond to status. So, if you're giving them prestigious recognition, then they're going to push themselves even harder. So, as much as we want to have playful and we want to have fun and we want those things, we also want to make sure that we are actually giving them something tangible and respectable to aim for, because they are going to want that. There's a reason why people really strive to become salesperson of the year or to get into the president's club. And it is for that prestige. It is for that status, that symbol of respect that they've earned their stripes and made it there. So that's another really great way to incentivize and encourage killers on your team to really push themselves. And that's to just create a president's club or to create top salesperson of the year or something like that. So as we wrap up, when handled correctly, killers do raise the bar for everyone, and they really can get your team over the limit and hitting goal and hitting target, which is obviously so important. But again, just want to reiterate that most sales managers are killers, and so they really identify with the killers on their teams. And that can mean that a lot of the other players are left out. And so this is honestly less of a podcast that talks about how to motivate killers, because for most of you already know, this is really about giving you the insight that not everybody is motivated the same way as killers, and that there are a bunch of different players on your team that also deserve recognition and deserve to be engaged with. Because at the end of the day, not engaging with 60% of your team, and 60% is probably a conservative estimate, you probably have closer to 80% of your team being achievers, socializers, and explorers versus being killers, because I would argue that it's probably only the top 10% that are killers. So by not engaging that middle and bottom part of your team, you're leaving so much on the table. And not only are you leaving so much on the table, but you're also risking turnover from those players that are not being engaged, turnover from your top performer because they feel the weight of the responsibility of being a top performer and having to carry the team. So this is really more of a cautionary tale that feels really intense, and I'm not trying to be that intense. I'm not trying to be that intense with the Bartle players, but I do think that it's really worth pointing out, because I think a lot of managers that are running a team, they see the people that they identify with and relate to and are kind of like very on board with that. And then the rest of the people, they're kind of like, I don't know, they suck, but they don't suck. They're just different. They're just engaged differently than you are. So I hope that this podcast and this episode has been helpful, and we've kind of walked through some of the key markers of a killer and some of the ways that you can motivate them and some of the other ways that you can engage the entire team and encourage all of the participation from every player in your group, because that's really what this is all about. We really want to encourage creating sales cultures that are inclusionary and really tap into everybody's expertise and skill, because that is how you're going to get the most out of your team, is engaging with everybody consistently and giving that recognition consistently. That's how we ultimately get to goal consistently, right? And that's what we all want. We all just want to be able to say we hit our targets every quarter, we never miss, and this is how you can do it. So that is it for today's episode. I appreciate all of you so much for joining me and listening. As always, please like, subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment, and we will see you next time.